All right. So I'm going to go ahead and call the Thursday, November 4th Curriculum Committee meeting to order. We have two items on our agenda tonight. The first one was sent back from the full board meeting to answer any further questions about the IB program and the recommendation to discontinue it. And then it was recommended that we officially approve that as a committee and then bring it back to the full board next week. So,
I'd make a motion to follow the recommendation to not close, not dismantle. Discontinue the International Baccalaureate program at Lincoln High School.
And I would second that since Kathy's not here. So all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So I think we're done with that, Lee. I think we can move forward and we'll bring that to the full board with that voted recommendation.
And then we'll let the staff know that the recommendation will be made action by the board because they of course know that there was a recommendation. And then what we'll do is we'll then have a conversation after that official approval with all students in the program currently, as well as those who are juniors, and we'll reassure them that we'll get them through for their diploma.
Okay, that sounds great.
Yep.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. All right. And the other thing that's on our agenda tonight is our K-12 math update. And some of this kind of piggybacks, I think, on our prior discussions where we had a somewhat of a data dig. So I'm going to turn it over to Jason and Roy.
Thank you. There should be 3 documents in board book for you. And we're going to follow Mr. Tennis's model of not putting it on the big screen, but we'll just walk you through these pieces here. Seem to work well. So the first piece, I think they're in order. So the first thing we're going to talk about is K-12 math slideshow. Okay, so I'll start us off and I'll tell you when I'm going to switch slides. Just a little bit of history of what brings us to kind of this model of presentationing around K-12 math. I'm going to watch over my shoulder for Kathy just so you know. Lori and I have shared with the members of the curriculum committee kind of the PD schedule for the year. So you've seen that. And you've seen some data, really 6-12 data. So we wanted to do something different that gives the team a comprehensive look and a different look at K-12 math. And these 3 documents really give that different perspective about what's going on in our district as it relates to math. Okay, so the first thing is that slideshow. I think it's important to note that there are really 3 pillars that Lori and I and others talk about as it relates to math in our district. And the first pillar is really collaboration for our adults and collaboration for our students when they're talking, learning, and exploring math. The second pillar is really around problem solving or problem-based learning, really allowing students to explore mathematics through problems, develop different strategies as they are doing that problem solving, and sharing those different strategies. And the third kind of pillar is just that spiraling, right? We want to continue learning and exploring and talking about a concept over a week and over a month and over a year and the next year. So it's really that spiraling of mathematical conversation and learning over time. And the goal is really to have our students retain their understanding and mastery of those understandings over time. So,
Jason, can I ask a quick question?
Please.
Is that your slideshow, does it have the pillars in it?
no,
Okay,
that's just
all
my
right.
notes. Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. And so you'll see the slideshow. It's void of a lot of words because we wanted the pictures to tell the story. That was on purpose. So I'm going to change to the next slide here. It says high school math. I think you see some elbows and then 2 students there, right? So that is coming from I should tell you this, that Lori and I scheduled between 1 and 3 hours in every building. And sometimes they knew we were coming, most of the time they didn't. And we went into classrooms that were math classroom, took pictures, and the next document is some conversations we had. So that's a reflection of about 12 hours of time spent in classrooms in every building. Okay, so this is coming from Lincoln High School. This second slide really. It's students in a geometry class, and as you see, we have students that are engaged in teamwork, solving problems, and the most important thing I think here is they're talking about math. That discourse is important to us. Okay. If you need me to stop, just let me know. I'm going to go through these slides. The next one is middle school math. These folks did not know we were coming, right? Knocked on a door, and I found these 2 professionals. These are our math coaches, one from Wilson, one from Washington, and they had a scheduled time to collaborate. This time they were talking about standards and how those standards can come alive in our math classrooms at the middle level. So I took a picture of them. So our professionals collaborate, one of the pillars. Next slide is again from high school. It's Lincoln High School. Again, different classroom, same things that we're looking at though. We have students collaborating around problem solving, and can't see it in the picture, but we know that they're sharing their strategies about how to solve those problems. That's where the power comes in here. Next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Lori Williams.
Okay, so in this picture, it's way better to see in the slideshow than it is on my black and white copy. You can see the boys at that table have algebra tiles. That's a middle school classroom. And for a lot of kids, the students who struggle with algebra concepts, it's because they throw letters in with the numbers, right? And the algebra tiles allow kids to kinesthetically and visually represent algebra equations and solve them and think about the operations. And it allows access for a lot of students to those concepts. And then they slowly learn how to record that as algebraic steps in solving equations. So they work as teams, but they have the manipulatives with them. On the next slide, you'll see a couple of elementary school students. These kids are playing Target 1000, which is a number sense, adding, subtracting fluency game where they are using strategies based on place value, to start thinking about tens and hundreds and ones and the relationship and building that number sense of 3-digit numbers. If you look at the next one, this is one of my favorite pictures with the little boys and the dominoes. That's a first grade classroom. And at this point in the year, the kids are learning addition strategies by adding the dots on a domino. And so each of the boys picks a domino and they add up their totals, and then they have to compare them. So they're also building number sense, and they have to say who's got more dots, right? And just, I don't know, we used to call it war. It's probably not right to call it war right now, but they're playing that domino game and building those addition strategies, number sense, a lot of counting things, one-to-one correspondence, like just a whole ton of stuff in that first grade classroom. The next one is, I'm actually not totally sure of the grade level. I want to say green is 3rd grade. So they are working again on some addition with those 3-digit numbers and playing their games. And it looks like one of those young ladies is using her fingers a little bit to do some adding. So we know that during workplace time, when the kids are working like this and teachers are going around to see the kids, that's their opportunity to differentiate instruction and to be able to help the kids move from using their fingers, to mental math strategies, to fluency. So playing those games helps the kids to build the number sense, but it also allows that time for teachers to differentiate. But all of the slides that I've gone through talk about like collaboration. The kids are talking about numbers. They're playing with numbers together. They're problem solving when you got to try and figure out which way do I want to arrange the digits so I can get close to 1,000. Like all of that is incorporated into what they're doing in the classroom. And then the next one doesn't have any kids in it, but I love this picture. This shows a wall in a 4th grade classroom with each poster is all the different arrays or rectangles that you can make for each number. So for instance, if you were going to make the arrays for 6, you would have a 2x3 array. You would have a 3x2 array that would go the other way. You'd have a 1x6 and you'd have a 6x1. So when you put up all the numbers up to about 32 on those posters, you can see patterns. Prime numbers only have 2 arrays. Composite numbers have more than 2. Square numbers have an odd number. So they build that conceptual understanding of the mathematical vocabulary, but then the posters are hung so that they're there to reference continually through the year when they talk about factors, when they talk about multiples, and they've got that reference. So that leads to that spiral, as well as to the fact that the kids had to work together on the posters. Then they got up there and did some problem solving. Turn it back to Jason.
Thank you. The next slide is from middle school. And the things that you capture in pictures are pretty exciting to me. And what is happening in this classroom is the teacher was leading a discussion around data, who has cats and who has dogs and who has both. And the goal is to start talking about statistics, right? You're doing statistics. And how do you show your data? So the teacher asked for volunteers to come and talk about, if you look on the smartboard there, a bar graph and a Venn diagram. So multiple students volunteered. This young student comes to the board and is explaining when it's appropriate to use a bar graph, when it may be appropriate to use a Venn diagram. Teacher steps back. The student's asking questions, answering questions, and guiding the class about data. The next one here is one of my favorites as well. Elementary school, 2 students. If you look closely, again, on the left side of the edge of that rug there are cubes all lined up. And that leads to a discussion about perimeter, eventually area. They're counting, they're collaborating around measuring and counting. They're curious. You talk about, you can see things in students' eyes. That young lady is pretty joyful right there. And so again, there's multiple, this is occurring throughout the classroom, right? This is just one group of students. I could have done a better job of aligning, but the next slide is actually the classroom next door to the student at the middle level that was talking about bar graphs and Venn diagrams. So they're on the same topic. So this, again, is the teacher. It makes me feel old knowing that's the teacher, right? But the students had a discussion at their table about cats, dogs, or both. They get dots. The students are putting the dots on the bar graph. The teacher's just holding it. The students are having a discussion about what that data means. And so we leave this classroom, we go to the next classroom, and we saw that 2 slides ago. So they're on the same pace, which is helpful when our teachers are collaborating. They can talk about the strategies that worked well, what didn't work so well, what's the data that came out of that class experience, and what do they do next to make sure all learners are getting the concepts that we hope for. This next slide is high school math. There's a lot going on in this picture. I want to remind you that McKinley is our K-12 virtual school. But at the high school level, students have the option to start to be face-to-face, that blended, or full online, full virtual. So if you look here, there's a couple things that I think are pretty cool to note. The first thing is on the left there is the smartboard. And the smartboard is showing from CPM kind of the outline of the lesson for the day. So it talks about the concept they're talking about, get some bullet points about what that means to the student. To the right of that, you'll see that TV screen, Meredith, that I mentioned about for the Board of Education. Yeah. On that screen, there's at least 4 students, I think I count. So those are the students that are engaged in this math course virtually. The rest of the picture that you can't see, there's 6 or 7 students in class as well. So the teachers there really facilitating learning using the smartboard, knowing that there's students online, 6 or 7 students face-to-face, using the board there as well. It's pretty cool stuff going on there. So the story is told through the picture again. And the last one, I don't know what to tell you other than what I wrote here on the bottom is, this is what I'm talking about, right? This picture is why we move towards bridges, right? We have students leaning in, talking about math. We have students figuring out mathematical concepts, I would argue at very high levels for an elementary level, together. We have students huddled up, figuring things out, sharing with partners, sharing with the smaller group, and then a larger group. This, quite honestly, makes my heart warm, right? This is what we want to see, and we are seeing across our district in a year that has been presented with challenges over challenges over challenge, and our professionals are rocking it, and our kids are engaged. Questions about the slideshow?
Yeah, I have a question, Jason.
Please.
So what is the next date that we will be testing to see if this program is bringing some good returns for us? What is that next possible testing date where we can get some data?
Sure. So I think of us testing or assessment
Right.
kind of 2 ways. So one way I think about it is the assessments that are inherent or part of the resource, right? So Bridges has assessment as part of the program,
Right.
and that's ongoing.
Okay.
Okay. So one example, so that's ongoing. I would also say that we mandatoryized number corner assessments on our assessment calendar this year. It was to be completed by the end of September.
Okay.
We asked our math coaches and principals to share that data with us. And as a student learning office, Lori, Pam, Jen Schultz, Jessica DePrey, and myself looked at the data. So we're looking at the data, just having a discussion about what it's mean, what do we notice, what do we wonder about. So one answer is Bridges, the assessments are always
Right.
going on. And then in the spring, we are scheduled to have those standardized tests. So we'll do that forward exam test in the spring. And
No, okay, so is that the data then? Because I know something just had come out and it showed this decline and everybody's kind of questioning that.
Sure.
But so next year, when that test results come out, we're hoping that we're going to see an upward climb because of this program.
Without a doubt.
Is that the plan?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we do have something in place to try to,
Absolutely.
okay,
And, Pam and I have outlined kind of a timeline for sharing. We call it the report card data, right? That comes from our forward exam, our Aspire, and then ACT data.
Okay.
So our schools and our district gets a report card.
Okay.
Those report cards are officially not unembargoed yet. but they're saying mid-November. So what Pam and I have kind of outlined is we're hoping, Mark, we shared the timeline with Mark, so he needs to approve it, but we have I call it a three-part mini-series that we want to engage the full board with. One will be before the data is out, just educating around what the report card says and how they calculate it. The next will be about the district report card and making sure everyone can access the individual schools. And then the third part will be kind of longitudinal data, and then our school goals from our school action plan. So we'll show the board all the action plans because we want to show that we are working towards improving those data. So November 9th through December 14th, we have 3 board meetings kind of mapped out. We'll do some education, some data digging, and then kind of what's next, what's the plan.
Okay, sounds great, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions about the slideshow? Okay, the next document I think is somewhere around 24 pages. I'm not going to read the thing to you, but I just want to show, talk about what it means or where it comes from. So we talk about, when I think about data, I think about hard data and soft data. Hard is the numbers, right? The soft data is more anecdotal. What are people saying or feeling? So as Lori and I navigated across the district and joining every building and many classrooms, we stopped and talked to students and staff, and we asked 2 questions. One is, what 2 things do you like most about math in the MPSD? And then the second question is, if you could change one thing and it'd be different about math tomorrow, what would you change and why? And this is unedited. It reflects what came out of the mouths of our students and staff. Okay? And it's a wide variety of perspectives and insights that Lori and our student learning office team will use as we continue to think about what's next in math. There's also some fun things. I don't know what page it is, but I asked the first grader, I think, what would you change about math? He told me that his father was rich and he's buying a motorcycle. And that's in here, right? It's just unedited, whatever came out of the mouth. So there are some themes, I believe, right? There are some themes about our students at the elementary love workplaces. That's what you saw in the pictures here. That's what I think Kathy Willis mentioned when we did the learning walk was, we talk about these games, but is it just games? No, the answer is no, it's not just games. It is a learning opportunity. And our students are saying we like that. And we're seeing a lot of pieces about collaboration and a lot more, again, anecdotal, softer data. So again, I'm not going to read it to you. If you haven't already, please just take a look at it. And if you have questions at any time, I'd be happy to answer them. Questions now about, it's a lot, but.
It is a lot. With some of the feedback that you got from the teachers, are those gonna be, are those things that'll be addressed at some point? I mean, it seems like at the high school level, they feel like we have to stick to CPM a little bit too much. And at the middle school level, they're looking for some more support for the students. So will that be integrated through the year then? I know it's a very small subset of your population, but I want to be conscious that we ask them a question, we ask them for feedback, and we should respond. Right?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. I would say at the high school level, there's some themes that came out, right? And one is like this connectedness to the resource.
Yeah.
So I think of that, again, attack it 2 different ways. One is that our collaborative teams really have to get comfortable with and understand their standards. And as they grow in the understanding of standards and then bring in the resource and see how those 2 match, they do have autonomy, but we want to make sure we stay tight now because we're seeing there's some growth area in the understanding of standards. The second thing I would tell you is CPM came up a lot, right? So Lori and I have already talked about, is it time for us to have a conversation about, is CPM the answer?
As a parent, needed CPM.
Right,
It was hard to help at home.
absolutely.
Even though they had the online resource, it just didn't give a whole lot of explanation, trying to be a helper.
So,
You know, maybe it is time to evaluate, just given this. And,
absolutely. So Pam and I meet with the high school leaders once a month and the middle school principals once a month. It's on the next agenda for us to ask, would you be supportive of engaging in a conversation about it? It might be the same resource or it might change. And if those leaders are saying, yes, we'll talk to some teachers about it, and then we would map out a timeline very similar to our timeline that we use for bridges or process around bringing people together, understanding the standards, bringing some 1, 2, 3 resources that match, and then having that team select, and we go through that whole process of adopting a different resource. It'll be a multi-year process, but the first step is this. The second step is to talk to our leaders, and then we'll go from there.
And it may have the same outcome, but at least going through
Absolutely.
the process gives an evaluation.
Absolutely.
So does Bridges have a middle school or high school program? They do not.
No, actually, the best aligned is CPM.
Oh,
With the standards.
with Bridges? Okay.
Although I would say that right now in development are a number of really great programs. And they're coming out, like, they've got the middle school ready and the high school is coming out first as algebra and then as geometry and then as, but there are also a number of really great programs coming out that are not algebra, geometry, algebra 2. They're math 1, math 2, math 3, because that's what the rest of the world does.
And then they spiral it.
So then they have a bit of algebra and geometry and prob and stats all in each one, which again, that's what the rest of the world does. So,
Absolutely.
but that's a hard change in a community that's very tied to their algebra, geometry, algebra 2 sequence. So,
But this has been a model for over a decade,
yeah,
the spiral model. I mean, you know, and we know that it works with kids. We know that it works with adults.
Right. Right.
But we know
And
it works with teenagers, right?
the other thing is the integration, right? Is when you're using algebra through geometry instead of skipping a year of algebra before you go to algebra 2.
Yeah.
Like when you really get that integration, you get a much deeper understanding of mathematics.
Absolutely.
So like, absolutely, all of that would be on the board or on the table,
Yeah.
right? If we were gonna move forward, so,
That's
and it would be a
exciting.
team of teachers that would be going through the process, right?
Yeah.
Same as we did with Bridges.
That's most definitely a consideration that it needs to align with Bridges, right?
Right.
We can't do Bridges and have our students, go back to that last picture, right?
Right.
Be really used to discussing and exploring and failing forward and doing what's going on here. And then at the middle and high school be something very different. We'd be setting our students up to fail.
Right.
So that, along with the standards conversation, has to be part of that conversation as well.
Okay.
All right, the last document is, I don't
Just a
remember
one
the
pager.
title of it, but
Yeah.
it should be kind of a snapshot of the professional development. So
Right.
Lori's going to walk us through that.
Yeah. You saw the comprehensive plan for professional development that has Tracy Frank coming in as a coach for the middle school and the high school. And we have our own math coaches at the elementary level. We have planned professional development days, all of those kinds of things. So what I did is I took first quarter and put together the summary of what has happened so far this year with just a little bit more detail for you. The title of the document does say 4K12, and I forgot to put the 4K in there. Sorry about that, and my apologies. I did work with Jennifer Callan, who is our 4K coordinator now. She's new this year. And we talked about how in the past, the 4K teachers have their own math committee that's been trained and has had professional development. They tend to lead that professional development for anybody who's new on staff. And we include in that group the Head Start teachers, so that we try and get the Head Start classrooms to meld with the MPSD classrooms and the expectations and such. So, and then they also have assessments that we use on, if you look at the assessment calendar, there are 4K assessments that just give us that baseline of, are the kids learning to count to 10? They know their colors, their shapes, their, those kinds of things. So we're in good shape there. And then what is coming right now, you can see in that elementary column that our math coaches are getting into classrooms and doing individual coaching in those 3 buildings that have the math coaches. And Franklin did start also to get some individual coaching time. We, without a math coach at Franklin this year, I'm working with their PLC teams on Thursdays, and then Tina Lemons from CISA 7 is their math specialist, and she's coming in to do coaching cycles with the teachers. So she'll get through, each one of the K3 teachers will have a 4-session coaching cycle with her throughout the year this year, and then I'll pick up the 4th and 5th grade. So we've got that going as well, and then there's the individual and PLC coaching that's happening at the middle and high school. Cool. So any questions about that, math in general?
I know we had talked before about how we designate kids into higher levels of math. And I don't know if we were gonna have a discussion about that at some point.
Yes.
Specifically at the middle school.
Yeah, that's the last agenda item there. I think
Okay.
it's reflection and next, yeah.
Perfect.
Anything about PD before we?
Oh, one thing I was gonna ask is the math coaches, do they focus more on looking at individual data of the kids they're working with and how best to?
The
or
math
is it
coaches
overall-
actually work with staff.
Right, but I meant like, let's say the staff is having trouble with a student that's struggling with
Oh,
math.
sure. So when we would get together, like last week when I ran the professional learning community discussions, right? So we brought the data from the most recent assessment, whether it was a quiz or a test. They're called something different in Bridges, but you know what I mean, right?
Sure, yeah.
So we'll bring that, and we specifically name the students who are proficient, the students who are approaching proficiency, and the students who still are scoring far from proficiency. And then Bridges actually has the, what do you do with the kids who are struggling, resources linked in there. So then we go through those and choose as a team which one we're going to try with those groups of students and be able to come and report back on it the next week. So that's a collaborative part of that PLC process. It also goes for those students who are like nailing it, right? And making sure that they also have some additional challenge.
Thank you.
Before we kind of close out with that discussion, Stacey, that you mentioned, it's important to note that the work that we tried to capture by picture, by anecdotal data, and this PD is the reflection of the work of many professionals. And I had many sleepless nights last year. One of them was around, are we really going to try to pull off Bridges the first year in a pandemic year? That was a tough decision, and I think it was the right decision for many reasons. And so our professionals have leaned into that learning and implementing. They're saying it's a lot of work, they're right, but it's the right work for our kids. And our middle and high school folks are continuing to learn about standards and how that works with assessment and engaging students. And our leaders are supporting that work. And Lori Williams has been instrumental in every part of that. So there's a lot of people doing a lot of great work for kids. So I think it's important for us to remember that always. The last piece is reflections and next. So there's two questions I would have. One is any reflections stemming from that longitudinal data that we shared, I think, about a month ago. And then the second question is any desire to further have a discussion about compacting or not compacting? I really look for direction from the reflections and then next steps as it relates to middle school.
Yeah,
Please.
I think we definitely need to continue that conversation. For a few reasons. I mean, we saw right in the data where it's not, it may be a good success and an excitement for seventh graders to go into that compacted math model at that time. But sometimes they might reach that capacity in high school, and that becomes an issue, trying to earn that third or fourth math credit if they've been really successful at the beginning and then don't have any additional math courses to take, and that's a real concern. I also have a lot of concern for that ACT score in the end and just not seeing the bulk of those folks pan out on those ACT scores. There didn't seem to be a correlation between compacted math and the ACT score, which is kind of that pinnacle score, right? I mean, that's why we were looking at it. So, yeah, so I think the conversation needs to continue. I know there are families who are very excited to have that compacted math for their child. And I think we need to recognize that there are kids who need that additional challenge. And when I say additional challenge, it means not just here's some extra work, but really how do we push them potentially to a higher level within the classroom? And maybe that means that there's a small subset meeting a certain criteria to do something like that, but not a catch-all bucket. I think that's kind of where I'm at. And Stacy, you might have different thoughts on that.
I'm not sure how is the compacted math the same as the math enrichment program? Yes, okay. And you said that how many students that are in that right now?
Don't quote me on the numbers, but I'm pretty sure at the seventh grade level at Washington, we have 0.
Okay.
At Wilson, I think it's about 7. So that's the number, don't quote me on. And then the 8th grade level, I would be guessing, but I would say the majority of students that started in 7th grade compacted last year continued in 8th grade. So I can get those numbers, but again, the largest or the large percent of students that started there continued in 8th grade.
And is it my understanding that the students that went into the compacted math, we gave them one assessment and that was used, and if they didn't score high enough, then they weren't going into the compacted math? Is that what happened?
Well, for this year's 7th grade, is that what you're asking?
I'm not sure what grade this particular student is that I'm thinking of.
5th? I can just answer it and tell me if I missed the
Sure.
mark. So 7th grade, compacting is the 7th and 8th grade together. And it's really the easiest way I think about it is 3 years of math and 2 years, okay? So again, I would just remind the team that everything we talked about last year is an asterisk, right? So last year, Lori and I developed criteria to enter the 7th grade, so that first year of compacted, based on 3 of 5 criteria or components on the forward exam.
Okay.
And then if students met that, we gave them a call it Carl Rogers because I think I'm funny. It's the Karen Rogers Passion Inventory, and you get a score for that as well. And really, Lori sat down with the students, gave the assessment, and really just measures their excitement and passion for mathematics. And we got some feedback from parents. We did open up for another round, and we gave some students that had met additional, Lori, help me, how do we get?
We looked at historical data
Thank you.
on the forward exam, so maybe their forward exam in the COVID year wasn't a good representation.
Sure.
So we went back to a couple of years prior to look for students who had been scoring advanced
Thank you.
in prior years, and then gave them the opportunity to take a kind of a placement test to see if they had really mastered deeply all of that 6th and 7th grade material.
And what we found in that data when we dug in it, I know it's like, it seems so long ago, but it hasn't
Sure.
been that long. Seems to me that test, that forward test was a really good indicator of that end goal of being proficient on the ACT.
I think the forward and Aspire,
In the
we didn't show Aspire data,
Yeah.
but I feel better every year saying that the forward and Aspire are pretty good indicators.
Okay.
They're more rigorous than like a STAR or a MAP score or any of those kinds of things, because you can't get the depth of understanding on a test that adapts. Just technically, the technology behind an adaptive test doesn't allow for the same level of rigor and the same level of measuring depth of understanding of the standards.
You didn't ask Stacy, but the last part I would say is that if we continue to compact next year or beyond, we will have to identify some criteria that isn't so tight, right? It was tight on purpose because we knew students were coming off of a year that we did asterisk, and we didn't want to set them up for future years of failure. So we would look at multiple data sets moving forward if that's the direction we go in.
Which is what we've done in the past years as well.
Is there, and I'm just thinking about, like when you're in college and it says in the course catalog that you need these prerequisites, but if you don't, you need approval from the professor to take the class. Is there a way for a family to petition to be in the class and bring some artifacts that would suggest that they would be successful and that they could advocate to be in that class if they wanted to?
I would say that in the past, we've allowed that, and we saw a greater number of students being put into 7th and then 8th, the 2-year compacted. In my personal opinion, is that what has led to some degree to that longitudinal data that doesn't align well. So yes, the answer is yes, we have done that. I don't think that's the best choice for students. And our data is showing it, quite honestly.
So if they don't meet these 3 criteria, there's no other, there's nothing else that they can do to get into a higher math class if they want to?
This year at the middle level, the answer is no, but there are the floodgates kind of open up at the high school level, because you can take, there's a compacted opportunity at the high school, and there's also an opportunity to take 2 math courses, which seems overwhelming, but I've seen it successful as a high school principal and in this district. That students that are excited and passionate about math, it's not overwhelming because they love it.
Right, so there's an opportunity for kids, and maybe they don't choose to be in compacted math at this point, but they can reach the absolute highest level math course by the end of their high school career,
Absolutely.
whether they join in compacted math or not at this point.
Yes.
we would never want to lose our AP math classes,
Absolutely.
our AP, AP Calc, AP Stats. We would never want those opportunities to go away.
Exactly, yeah. Because we know we have kids who can achieve it and do really well.
And that
Be very successful.
it benefits them in their career choices
Mhm.
and their after high school. Like,
Absolutely.
our goal would be to never close a door.
Mhm.
With that said, I think you're closing a door to this particular student who wants to be in that class and has evidence from her previous teacher in other areas. So it would be nice if they didn't have to wait till high school and lose 3 years of being challenged by not being able to be in that class if they wanted to challenge themselves. Not sure what the danger is in allowing a student that wants to work hard to be in an accelerated math class.
I think the danger comes out in our scores. And when we're being told by the community, your scores are declining. I feel like if
Can you
there's
draw,
not as much of a math proficiency there,
can
what
you
we're doing is
draw,
setting them
can you
up.
draw a direct correlation that the students that have chosen to be in the higher math, that has led to poor test scores?
Well, maybe that's something we need to try.
Pretty
Well, we do,
close.
we have that in the data.
Pretty close. There's always, when you're dealing with humans, right, the cause and effect kind of thing, but when you look at the data from students who didn't meet criteria going in, and then you look at their ACT scores, the piece that they score the lowest in on the ACT is algebra, and those are the standards that they skip in that compacted class. That's pretty close to a cause and effect.
So what do we do with an outlier? And I guess, with data, you can isolate the data, right? And look at, so you could keep track of the kids that ask themselves to be in this class and challenge them and take that out from the people that actually qualified to get in it.
Mhm.
And I can't imagine that there's that many kids that are busting down the door asking for more accelerated math. So again, I just think it would be nice to have some type of offering to those students that feel like they have artifacts that show that they can be successful in the class and can opt in if they want to, and that we can look at that data and isolate that to see whether or not that's truly happening.
Isn't that what we reviewed a month or two ago? We did look at those students that didn't
It
qualify by the
wasn't,
test
yeah,
score.
it wasn't disaggregated by students who met the criteria and those who didn't. It was
Gotcha.
just the students who had gone through the compacted class,
Gotcha,
and
okay.
we saw that we did not have
By
very many
choice,
students
by testing
scoring
or-
advanced in the ACT, so there was no correlation to show that taking a compacted class actually helps your ACT score.
I don't know the individual student or family that you're in reference to, obviously, but, I look at it as a multitude of layers or factors, right? One is that longitudinal data. Are there outliers? Absolutely. I think of a coming off of that asterisk year where many students struggle, some thrive, many students struggle. I think about the opportunities that will be offered at Lincoln when we get to high school. I also think, quite honestly, is there are, where do we draw the line? I know the criteria was tight, right? But if we say yes to this family because they're passionate, what do we open it up for the next family because they're passionate?
I don't know, I don't know if it's just passionate as it is that they have artifacts that suggest that she'd be successful. They have her previous math teacher that would vouch for her to be in this class. So I'm not suggesting that it's just because I think it would be good. I really think that maybe they didn't perform well on this particular item, but they just think that if there's a child that really wants extra work and to push themselves, that there would be some sort of way that they could, a criteria that they could meet outside of that to be considered.
Sure. Again, I
What
don't know
would
the
be
family.
Availability for someone who doesn't have a parent advocate, who might be really excited about math?
Again,
Do we say no way, or?
no, I'm not saying, it's not just about excitement. I think I think teachers also look for students in their classes that can perform well and would make a recommendation that they would be in this class. So it wouldn't just be a parent, it would also be a teacher.
That was the criteria in the past, I know. When my daughter went through, that was part of the criteria. You had to have a recommendation from a teacher.
Well, we don't need to belabor it. If the answer is no, the answer is no, that's fine. I just want
I think there needs to be
to,
opportunities for some kids that need the extra challenge. And I don't know if an entire compacted math class is the solution, or if it's some scaffolding, some,
I wonder if that's part of a continuing conversation,
yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
Like, what is the best option for providing a good level of challenge
Yeah.
for the students who want and need that level of challenge at the middle school? And do we use some of that longitudinal data to help us plan that, as well as, we've got some history of how the standards have changed. Like, there was a lot in that
Yeah.
report, right? So
I think there should be some weight given to a teacher that feels
Right.
that student should go into that compacted class.
Because
So-
they know those kids.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, so, and I really would not want to see somebody in that situation, whether it's one or two kids, lose that opportunity.
Mhm.
So I'd reach out to you to give that some consideration. So I don't know how we can coordinate this, or what, look at that recommendation, talk to that teacher. Why does that teacher feel that this student can be successful in there? I really think we should look at that.
Yeah, thank you. Again, I don't know the individual student we're talking about here, but
well, she writes the board, the parent writes the board. I think she's written us about 3 or 4 times.
Yep.
She's been told that she will be given extra work. She says she's been given 1 worksheet. So we're not meeting the mark with this particular student. And, I've heard us all say that, each student should be enriched, and each student should be challenged, and each student should be, so whatever's happening with this student, the student's not feeling that they're being challenged and they weren't allowed to be in this class. So certainly forward you the information, but I know she's had to have talked to somebody, I would
Sure.
imagine, in the student learning office.
I believe that that student was one of a number of students that was provided that second round based on longitudinal data to demonstrate understanding of concepts on that CPM assessment that Lori mentioned, and did not meet the marker that was established by the teachers.
The
Yeah.
current teachers, or,
Yes.
okay.
And so when I think I know the student, when I hear that story, I think about the differentiation that's occurring in the classroom versus compacting. So that's what I think about. And how do we continue to grow differentiation and great instructional strategies that do challenge all levels of learners in the classroom?
Have we gotten feedback from the middle school teachers, and then on the other hand, the high school teachers on their take on the compacted math and how that works as a middle school teacher, and do they, and then on the high school end of things, do they see that as value for students coming in, or do they see those students who took that struggle, or do we have any of that input from them?
Absolutely. I don't remember exactly the last time that we kind of had this conversation with the curriculum committee. We had some feedback from teachers then. And I would say as many math teachers there are as many opinions, right? It just varies by teacher and perspective. And that's why we're having this discussion here. That if this group would like us to explore the future of compacting, and that may lead to not compacting, then we can do that. If we'd like to explore how to really define and communicate some clear criteria that is not based on an asterisk year, then we can do that. But I'm really just looking for direction.
Any recommendations on how to move forward?
So the decision is whether to continue to compact or not, is that?
I'm looking for some recommendation.
How many, as time goes on, and this might be hard to estimate, how many kids do you feel like will be in the compacted class
That is
over time?
That is a very tough question, right? Because if we want to continue compacting, I think Lori, Jason, and building leaders and teachers need to have a conversation about the clear criteria. And then make sure that every parent, student, we put on a billboard, right? We want everyone to know that criteria. And so that would be tough based on that. I would say that I would expect a decrease in enrollment in compacting as it compared to pre-pandemic, because at that time we were just adding to the population of students that didn't meet the criteria. So if we stick to that criteria and we have great discussions about this is the criteria, this is the criteria, this is the criteria, I don't know the number, but I think it'll be less than pre-pandemic 7th and 8th grade compacted, because we wouldn't be adding to the population of students that didn't meet. Again, based on those factors of long-term, we're seeing, again, there's outliers, but we're seeing data that doesn't match up with what we would expect.
Is there, does Bridges promote the compacting?
No.
Okay. So, is there any data on Bridges and compacting?
Probably not.
Okay.
Probably not. I can certainly call there, but because it's a K-5 program and it's meant to, again, differentiate deeply for students at their grade level, there's I can't imagine, I will ask, but I can't imagine that they have within even their research, kids skipping 4th grade to go to 5th grade or any kind of compacting like that, because the philosophy behind it fits with research of going deeper. Excuse me. Going deep with the math and making sure that the foundations of number, operation, and fractions, decimals, that is solid coming out of elementary
Yeah, I'm
school.
just wondering if you were in Bridges through 5th, and then you were going into 6th, 7th, 8th, would we see more kids eligible for compacted math based on the strength of the Bridges program, I guess is kind of what I'm asking. And I know that's a hypothesis.
Right, it really is. I would say if we were acting under, and this is my hypothesis, right? So if we were under the old standards prior to 2010, I would say absolutely, we would be knocking it out of the water.
Okay.
because there were so much of 5th grade and 6th grade that was in the standards year after year after year. And so in 8th grade, 60% of the material was not new. So absolutely, could you compact when less than half of the year was new? You could take the new from 7th grade and the new from 8th grade and put it in a year and be ready for algebra. Absolutely. The new standards, there is zero overlap from year to year to year. It's only build on. So very, very difficult to compact even for those really, really strong students. And it's not recommended in the middle school, in the research, in the country, across the board.
Okay.
We can definitely reach out to Bridges if, you know, if they have.
I'd be
any
happy to do that.
opinions, but the second thing is that this year's kindergartners are the first group of students that would be have that full Bridges experience and without last year's asterisk, right? So it'll take some time for us to see the impact that Bridges, I believe, will have on our learning, right? So we're seeing, for example, current 4th and 5th graders struggle a bit because it's so different than math expressions, which was different than Bridges.
Do any other districts do this compacting in a middle school environment
Yes.
in Wisconsin?
I would say fewer compact as skip 8th grade.
Oh, okay. Okay.
There are some, and I think they're slowly going away from it.
Oh, really?
Yes, very much so.
Okay. So would this be something where we could revisit this and maybe have some recommendations of how to move forward? Is that like, if you had the ideal model, you know, how we might do that? And maybe it's, if we keep the compacted math, what does that criteria look like after a year that's semi-normal?
Right.
Right? And then, you know, maybe what that progression would look like if just to wrap our brains around it a little bit more, if the compacted math was eliminated or severely reduced, what would that look like for a child not going through compacted math, but yet wanting to reach the AP stats at the end, or the, you know, those upper level classes, just what that sequence may look like, so that we can get a kind of a grasp of that. Does that make sense?
Do you guys want to keep compacted? Like, do you think that's the best thing for us? Would that be your recommendation?
My recommendation now would be that I believe there's a small group of students that need more mathematics. I've seen it. I have a freshman at home right now, and I have a junior at home right now. They're in the same doggone math class. Algebra 2. So I'm living it, okay? So I believe there is a small group of students that need extra love, support, challenge in mathematics. I don't believe that is appropriate for a great, I don't know what it means, middle number or great number of folks. So I believe it's appropriate for a small number. And we have a process, the DEP process, where we can work to identify those students and work to provide those opportunities. So that's my answer.
Is there an opportunity to say, maybe you didn't perform well on the forward exam? Is there another assessment that could potentially be looked at all?
Well, and that's what we did this year with that second round,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
So,
I guess the only other thing I would like us to look at would be if we we don't do the I'm gonna say three things, I guess. If we don't do the compacted math, what would we do? If we did the compacted, can we do the compacted math and something else that's accelerated?
Like a 7th grade higher level math kind
Yeah,
of
so
thing is what you're thinking?
there's the 7 that are future engineers, right? And then I just wonder if there's another step in the middle that may, and if there's not, can we create a enrichment package, so to speak, that we would give this family, these families that want to do that? Does that make sense? So
There are options out there that we could bring back as possibilities, because you're right, like, we need something to replace it, or we can think about like the DEPs, we can continue to differentiate 7th and 8th grade math for most, and are there that handful of students who need DEPs, right? And go, so we could certainly bring options of things.
Because I'm wondering if, had there been that other program or even a planned set of materials to offer this family, if that would have, been helpful. So just if we can explore those options. I mean, again, I think you're right. I think there is a room for compacted math. I'm certainly not gonna, I wouldn't have been in it. But I think there is, so again, in the spirit of trying to offer what we can to all students, what can we come up with, to do that?
It will not be November 18th's curriculum committee, but
Come on.
the 4 things that I wrote down are this, and it would be December, the goal will be December, it might be January. Just to flesh out some possible criteria, that's one. 2, as I heard Meredith, I think, say, like, what does a pathway look like for a student without compacting? So we'll bring that. One is, I think it's important, even with the story with the student, is what are the PD, it's a really technical term, about things that we would have to do to ensure that differentiation is really good in all classrooms. And then the 4th is enrichment, question mark. What does that mean, right? If we're gonna tell our parents we have this enrichment, we have to provide what that means to them. So those are the 4 things that we can bring to the
That
table.
sounds great.
December or January at the very latest.
What does that mean for the time frame of registration? Well, I guess that's
It's not in the
okay.
booklet.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we've really done, again, last year was asterisk, but we really worked late spring
Okay.
to identify students, so we would be on track for that.
Okay.
So they would stay in this compacted math all this year? Is that
Yeah,
what
we're
you
not,
mean?
we would,
I'm
this,
saying registration for next year.
Got it.
I didn't know if there was like a time frame for that,
I'm
but
thinking-
it's not in the catalog.
Yeah, I'm thinking high school and changing classes.
Yeah.
That's a-
And at the high school, all classes are open to all students.
Right.
It's like, that is by choice, as long as you've taken the prereqs.
and just like IB, if we start 7th grade compact, we're gonna offer it 8th grade, we're not gonna, so that,
Right.
whatever the plan is, we would all let do that.
And is 6th grade just a standard class then?
Mhm. 6th grade math, yeah.
It's the first year of CPM, and it's really an adjustment when you have to do a lot of explaining and a lot of writing in math. As it has been an adjustment. It won't be from the bridges, because you're going to have to do that kind of writing and explaining and justification for 6 years prior. So, but coming from expressions, it was a huge adjustment. And so we didn't want that transition year to try and to learn that, as well as doubling up on curriculum and things. So the 6th grade, and then the 6th grade had been in the elementary schools.
Right, yes.
Right.
Do we have a historical document that, for someone, anytime there's a new board member, like a history of the programs and what years we were doing them. I mean, just in my head, I think that would be helpful to say we were doing expressions and then we went to bridges and then we did compacted
We
and.
won't even talk about.
We
the one
did Scott
before that,
Forsman, and
everyday
before
math.
that we did. Right? Yep. I can go back 36 years for you.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know how long it has to be, but I think, as somebody on, there's always gonna be someone new on this committee, and I think it would be helpful to historically know when you guys are talking about a transition where somebody can kind of see that timeline. And again, I don't think it's something of urgency, but it might be helpful.
Absolutely.
I think I'd feel like I would know more if I could see where in the time frame this was all happening. So in your spare time, right?
That's a business office one, right? When we did the big purchases, right? 2000, I want to say Math Expressions was a 2004 copyright.
Yeah, but we were doing everyday math.
Oh, no, Everyday Math was 2004 and Math Expressions
Yeah.
was 2011.
Yeah. I was never so thankful to move to math expression.
It'll be somewhat like the book list, right? Like the last 4 years, we can tell you right now. We do have Lori Williams is,
Old.
no,
She's
that's
just
not
old.
what I was gonna say, but has the historical perspectives, but we can attempt to put together a math kind of resource timeline.
Yeah, and I think, as the community looks at, DEI scores and, when we talk about, like what Lisa was talking about, like our initiatives of bridges and how we see this being helpful with that. Again, I think that would be nice to see. And then also, I think, Lori, you can probably attest to this of how we recreate the wheel, right? In 40 years probably from now, we'll go back and think Math Expressions was the greatest thing. And, can we see that we did that and what, why we moved away from that? And so that, for as long as MPSD stands, that we would have a record of that so that everybody would know. So, we don't have to go back and do that. So just a thought.
All right, those are our agenda items tonight. So if we're good, Stacy, if you wanted to make
Yeah,
a
I will
motion
make a
to
motion
adjourn,
to adjourn.
and I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye. Thank you guys. Very, very cool.
Thank you.
Very welcome. Other questions?